parte parla di democrazia diretta. Quindi oggi siamo qua, abbiamo il primo ministro al mondo per la democrazia diretta, abbiamo Roma che in questi giorni sarà la capitale mondiale della democrazia diretta, quindi per noi questo è un risultato importantissimo, io sono estremamente felice di essere qui e lascio subito la parola alla sindaca Virginia Raggi.
I'm going to give the floor now to our mayor, Virginia Raggi.
Buongiorno a tutti, si sente?
Good afternoon,
Sì.
everybody.
Buongiorno a tutti, benvenuti
Welcome.
qui in Campidoglio.
Welcome to the capital.
Inizio con i saluti e saluto il Ministro
first of all, the
per la
Minister
democrazia
for
diretta,
direct democracy,
Riccardo Fraccaro.
Riccardo Fraccaro.
Saluto e
I would like to
ringrazio i
greet
due
and thank
co-presidenti
the
del
two
Global Forum che sono
co-presidents of the
seduti
Global
qui
Forum
accanto
that
a
are
me,
sitting next to me,
Mr. Joe Matthews
Mr.
e
Joe
Mr. Bruno
Matthews
Kaufman.
and Mr. Bruno
Saluto
Kaufman.
in platea
I would like
il
to
Ministro
greet
Savona.
Minister Savona that is sitting in the
Un
audience.
saluto cordiale a
I would
tutte le
also
autorità
like to warmly
ai
greet
relatori
all the authorities,
e a
all
tutti voi che
the
siete
speakers,
qui oggi
and
per
all the people
ascoltare
that are here
questo,
today to
per
listen
iniziare ad ascoltare quello che
to
ci racconteremo e ci sarà raccontato
what we are
su un
going to be
tema a
told
noi così caro,
and
quello
what
della
we are
democrazia
going to
diretta.
say
È
about
vero,
a
Roma si
very
trasforma
important
per
topic,
4
direct
giorni
democracy.
nella
It
capitale
is true.
mondiale
For 4
della
days, Rome
democrazia
is
diretta, da
becoming the
oggi
world
sino
capital of
al
direct
29
democracy.
settembre. Ci
Starting today
confronteremo,
until
scambieremo
September
idee,
29th, we will
ascolteremo
exchange views,
soprattutto i rappresentanti di
listen
quei
to the
paesi nei quali la
representatives of
democrazia
those
diretta è
countries
già
where
realtà
direct
e
democracy
ha
is
già,
already a
come
reality,
dire,
and
un numero
already
anche
has
importante di esempi che possono in qualche modo
examples
essere
that could
portati
be
e
replicated
studiati
and
per far
investigated
capire come
in order
questo
to
nuovo modello politico e sociale può
people understand
consentire
how
alla
this new
società
political
di
and social
progredire.
model might allow society to
Chiaramente
progress.
stiamo parlando di
Of
qualcosa
course,
che
this
qui
is
in
something
Italia
that here
è
in Italy
abbastanza
is
nuova.
quite
Io
new.
posso dire che sono molto orgogliosa
What
che
can I
Roma
say?
stia
I'm
ospitando
very
questo
proud that
evento.
Rome
Altrettanto
is
devo dire che
hosting
Roma
this event.
ha già
I have
iniziato
to
il
say that
percorso
Rome has already
verso la
started
democrazia
its
diretta.
journey
Come
towards
probabilmente
direct
alcuni di voi
democracy.
sanno,
As
quest'anno
some
abbiamo
of you
rivisto lo
may
statuto
know, this
di
year
Roma
we
Capitale,
had
un po' come se
revised
fosse la nostra legge
Rome's
fondamentale, la nostra
statutes,
Costituzione della città.
Let's say it's a
E
sort of
l'abbiamo
constitution
rivista
of the city,
introducendo
and we
la
have reviewed
possibilità di utilizzare nuovi
this
strumenti di democrazia
constitution by
diretta.
introducing new
Altresì abbiamo
direct
iniziato
democracy
a
instruments and
utilizzare
tools.
questi strumenti.
We have also started
Un primo
using such
esempio
tools.
ha riguardato la
An
mobilità
example
sostenibile,
is
un tema a noi
that of
molto caro.
sustainable
Sappiamo che Roma è una
mobility.
grande città e come
We
tutte le
know
grandi
that Rome is a
città
big city
soffre problemi di traffico.
and
E
suffers
allora abbiamo
from
voluto consultare i cittadini sulla
problems
formulazione
relating
di
to
ipotesi e di
traffic
progetti che
congestion.
potessero
So we
sviluppare
asked our
questo tema e devo dire che
citizens
essendo
for
il nostro primo
proposals
esperimento
and projects
abbiamo avuto,
to solve
e
some of
peraltro
our
esperimento
problems.
fatto
This was
online, abbiamo
pilot,
avuto
a
la
pilot project. It
partecipazione
was a
di
test.
oltre 28.000
More than
cittadini, quindi come
28,000
primo esempio
citizens
aperto a tutta la
participated
città è
in
stato
this
davvero un bel banco di
survey.
prova.
So it was a really
Adesso abbiamo
great
in
test
corso
bench.
una
Now
votazione
a
sul
vote
bilancio
is
partecipato
ongoing
per un
on
singolo municipio. Roma è suddivisa in
participatory
municipi,
accounts
abbiamo delle
for each
municipalità, quindi come dei
municipality of Rome,
piccoli
because Rome
distretti
consists of many
interni alla città
small
e stiamo
municipalities,
facendo
sort of
votare un
districts.
municipio
So
sull'utilizzo
one of
di una
those
somma
districts is now
abbastanza
voting
importante, sono
on
17
how
milioni
to
di euro
use
per lo
17
sviluppo di
million
progetti
euros
da far ricadere in quel territorio.
in that specific district.
Quindi ci stiamo affacciando
So we are
timidamente
starting
all'utilizzo di questi strumenti e devo dire che la risposta è sempre molto
those tools,
positiva.
and I have to say that we always have a very positive
Dobbiamo
reactions.
partire, siamo partiti
and
da una
responses.
constatazione
We started
che poi
by
è null'altro
making
che
an
il principio
observation,
enunciato dall'articolo
and it's
1
the
della nostra
principle that is
Costituzione che
established in
recita
Article 1 of our
con forma
Constitution
molto semplice:
that reads
la sovranità
very
appartiene al
easily,
popolo, che la
sovereignty
esercita nelle forme
belongs
e
to the
nei limiti
people
della Costituzione.
that exercises it within the limits
Nonché
and within in the
nella
forms that
Dichiarazione
are
universale
envisaged
dei
by the
diritti
Constitution.
umani
And in the Universal
vi è
Declaration of
nell'articolo
Human
21 un
Rights,
altro
Article
riferimento
21,
per noi molto importante. ogni individuo ha diritto di
reads each
partecipare al
individual
governo del
has the
proprio
right to
paese, sia
participate in
direttamente
governing
sia
his own
attraverso
country
rappresentanti
directly or
liberamente
through
scelti.
representatives
Ecco
that are
allora
freely
che la
selected.
democrazia si
So
può
democracy
esercitare
can
anche
be
direttamente
also
e noi dobbiamo
exercised directly,
studiare
and we
ed
should
esplorare le
study,
possibilità che
investigate,
moltiplicano la
explore the
consapevolezza dei
possibilities
cittadini
and
nei
ways to
confronti
to
dell'amministrazione,
strengthen the
nei
awareness of
confronti
citizens
degli
vis-à-vis the
amministratori della propria città
administration, the
e soprattutto
administrators
la
of their
possibilità che i
cities,
cittadini
and
hanno
also the
di
possibilities that citizens
esprimersi, di
have
far
to
sentire ai
express
governanti
themselves, to make
la propria
their
voce.
voices
E allo stesso
heard
tempo i
by
governanti
the
devono
governing
poter raccogliere queste
bodies,
indicazioni
and the elite,
per
the governing
elaborarle,
elites,
per
should be
strutturarle,
able to
per
collect
prendere
those
spunto.
those
Allora ci si apre un ventaglio di possibilità.
proposals.
Davanti a noi abbiamo veramente
So
un
there-
ventaglio di possibilità
there's a huge
ed è
range of
estremamente
opportunities
importante
and
poter essere qui
possibilities, and
oggi
it's extremely
per
important to be here
confrontarci
today
e
in order to
capire
exchange views
in quei
and
paesi, in quelle
understand
città dove la democrazia diretta è
how
ormai una
in those
realtà
countries where
consolidata,
direct
quali
democracy
possono
has
essere le
become a
problematiche
reality,
che
what the
hanno affrontato,
problems
quali
might
possono
be, what the
essere le
problems
soluzioni che hanno adottato, quali possono essere
which
anche
problems
delle, delle criticità che hanno
had to
portato
overcome,
a
what
nuove
issues
forme.
maybe led
E
to
io credo
new
che questo
forms of
consentirà
direct
davvero
democracy.
una crescita
I
in
think
senso
that this will
positivo
allow
di quella che
growing,
oggi è la democrazia.
will allow representative democracy to grow. We are enriching ourselves with a new, very important element. In some cases, well, there are some who fear these opportunities. We talked about that a few minutes ago with the organizers and the minister. Some people say that using direct democracy is a way to weaken the responsibility of the administrators. But that's not the case. The administrators should listen to the local people. The locals know the area much better, and it's very important to establish a very open and genuine dialogue. So I don't think that this means that means weakening their responsibility. On the contrary, it is a way to ask citizens to become active and aware citizens. That's what we have always been asking for. That's what we always asked for before sitting here on this side of the desk. We always wanted to be able to express our opinions, and today, hosting this prestigious conference is a way to say that we are heading towards that direction. We are ready to know, to test, and most importantly, we are ready to get all the suggestions and listen to all the experiences that may allow us to improve the journey that we just started. Thank you all. Microphone, please. The gentleman is not speaking in a live microphone. The interpreters cannot translate. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I am also proud and happy to announce the opening of the 7th edition of the Global Forum on Modern and Direct Democracy, and also for being the Minister for Direct Democracy. Sergio was right when he said that we really wanted to organize this. So we participated in the Tunis and San Sebastian Global Forum meetings, and we immediately thought that it was essential, it was necessary to bring these topics into the Italian public debate. So we are proud that the 7th Global Forum meeting is organized in Rome, because this way we can talk to the whole of Italy, we can discuss these topics and put them at the core of our public debate. Why? For a simple reason. In the West, we often talk about the crisis of democracy. Frankly speaking, I don't see any crisis of democracy. Maybe there might be a crisis of representative democracy, because a purely representative democracy is perceived today as not being enough. So maybe there's this need of having more democracy. Citizens want more democracy for a very simple reason, because citizens are better and better informed, more and more educated, and they can know every day what happens throughout the world, minute by minute. And knowing the truth, they also want, knowing reality, they also want to have an impact on reality, because if sovereignty belongs to the people, well, the people should be able to guide decisions and journeys. So I don't see any crisis of democracy. I rather see an increasing need throughout the world for more democracy. I am very happy to be the Minister for Direct Democracy. For one reason, when I was a member of Parliament, I dealt with the same things. But as I was not the minister, nobody asked me questions about these topics. Nobody asked me any questions on TV. Now, being the minister, I actually am always asked about this direct democracy and democracy. And when I tackle those topics, I can see that, first of all, there's lack of knowledge of the meaning of direct democracy. And this lack of knowledge entails fear and perplexity and some doubts. As you know, ignorance leads to fear and also to immobility. Now the debate is rising on whether direct democracy is compatible with representative democracy. Of course it is. Actually, it completes in the representative democracy, and institutions are forced to be really representative, and therefore to stick to their mandate, thus becoming better. Some other fears relate to the ability of the people to be able to make decisions on very complex topics and delicate topics. This is a debate that, you know, they had before everybody was allowed to vote. People were wondering whether uneducated people could vote and could participate in public life and decide for all the others. So some people even argued that and said that it would be dangerous. It was dangerous to allow non-educated people to vote. And another fear that I sometimes hear, I see Minister Salvora here. And for sure, he is very sensitive and aware of this topic. So, and citizens, through direct democracy, they want to approve many things that are expensive, and they will not care about the accounts. But we are in one of the countries that has the biggest public debt, and we only have representative democracy. So all these fears, these doubts are due to lack of knowledge. And lately, I'm trying to explain things, to put ideas on the table and theories on the table. So what's the value added of bringing the Global Forum here in Rome and in Italy? Is that of providing and of giving real and tangible examples? Because people will come here to the Global Forum that can tell you about their experience, a real experience of direct democracy. So they will tell us about the consequences of those tools, the impact of those tools on their communities. And you will see that direct democracy not only can go hand in hand with representative democracy, but it also allows making better decisions, because where they have advanced direct democracy, there's a lower public debt, there's less taxation, and there's more civic awareness. So the financial effects of direct democracy, well, there will be a panel dedicated to that, and you will see that this has a positive impact in public accounts. So this will be shown and proven by with evidence, by providing evidence. And the subtitle, well, the subtitle of this event also includes the word globalization. Usually the term globalization has a negative connotation, but here it's a positive. It has a positive one, making cities more globalized and therefore more democratic. It has a positive meaning because I went to school and I went to high school in the 90s, and in the 90s people started talking about globalization, and people said that globalization was wonderful. We should only be careful that it might only become a globalization for goods and markets, but it should be a globalization of ideas. Well, today we are fostering good globalization, that of ideas, of experience, of sharing, of good practices, so that we can share all of that, we can globalize those ideas and best practices and spread them everywhere. This is our goal. So not just words, but real facts and experiences. Words, experiences. I'm the minister of the Italian government. So after the Global Forum, we will have to translate everything into facts, but this will be our responsibility. So it will be our responsibility to take the ideas coming from the Global Forum and turning them into something tangible, and in the next few months you will be able to judge whether we were able to shift from words to facts. I am now concluding by wishing you all the best for the Global Forum, lots of participation, more direct democracy for everybody, so good democracy for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you to Minister Fraccaro, who gives the floor to Joe Matthews and Bruno Kaufmann, who are the co-chairmen of the Global Forum. You have the floor. In the microphone, please, in the microphone. The microphone is off. Thank you. Now it's working.
Grazie, buonasera.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everybody. Welcome to the Global Forum on Modern Direct Democracy 2018. My name is Bruno Kaufmann. I'm one of the two chairmen of the forum. At last, we are here. So best wishes to everybody, and thank you to our Mayor Virginia Raggi, to Minister Riccardo Fraccaro, because we are guests of this forum. Thank you to all the Roman people and to all the Italians. And now I will continue in English.
Dear friends, supporters, professionals, scholars, and critical observers of participatory and direct democracy, from across the world, from more than 90 countries and hundreds of cities of all continents. Let me start this 7th edition of the Global Forum with some good news, some bad news, and some other news. The good news is we are here. As we all know, tutte le strade portano a Roma. All roads lead to Rome. We are all gathering here in Rome because Rome and Italy never before in history has been as relevant to the development of modern direct democracy as today. And we got just 2 examples of that. The bad news are we are all navigating in truly troubled waters when it comes to the future of democracy and, in fact, the future of this planet. What we can see and experience is a powerful pushback by old-style autocrats around the world, building their electoral victories on policies of fear, polarization, and, in fact, false promises of direct democracy. These challenges, these crises do not come as a surprise to us. For too long time, modern democracy has been actively and consciously reduced to national representative government, a system where citizens are limited to give away their voices in recurrent elections. But of course, modern democracy is much more than representative government within a nation state. It's a human right, as the mayor already has said. It's enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, established 70 years ago on December 10, 1948. And I repeat, everyone has the right to take part in the government of their country, directly or through freely chosen representatives. So finally, to the other news. They are truly encouraging and should give us all the confidence, the courage, and the energy which we will need at this historic forum in this historic city at this critical moment of world history. Democracy has never been as widespread and vital as today across the globe. Never before in history so many people had access to civic education, to public information, and in fact participatory and direct tools of democracy. We have direct democratic procedures today in 13 out of 190 countries worldwide. Democracy is the power of dialogue, debate, and decision-making. And democracy is a lifestyle, a culture under which the losers of a popular vote process can be as happy and forward-looking as the winners. So let us start our 4-day forum here in Rome by shaking hands with the people around us and congratulating all of us to actively participate in making our democracies much more democratic. Auguri a tutti, I wish you all a great forum. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Thank you. First of all, I'm honored to be here. Thank you to the mayor, to the minister, the first national minister of direct democracy in the world, our friend Ricardo. This is big stuff. And for your words, it's pretty extraordinary to hear two folks now in politics with such a very citizen-centered perspective. Thanks to your teams, the city's team, which is just marvelous, and to our international consortium team for making this possible. So forgive the extended metaphor. I'm a journalist from Los Angeles. I just occasionally, co-president one of these. In 1963, a man from Rome and a man from San Francisco decided to pursue a new project together. It was risky. The director, Sergio Leone, and the actor, Clint Eastwood, were making a Western, which is a genre of film then thought to be in decline. They didn't have much money. They had been forced to cobble together small bits of cash from investors in many different countries. They were planning to make a new kind of Western, too, of the sort the world hadn't quite seen before, and it was not clear there was an audience for what they were going to make. There was another problem, which was that films at that time were largely seen as national projects, expressions of a particular country. There were American films, French films, Spanish films, Italian films, Japanese films. But here they were making something that blended the experiences of many different countries into something new. There was an American star, then little known, and an Italian director making a film in Spain that was about a story set in Mexico. They were using a lot of German money, while borrowing from French film and especially from Asian filmmaking traditions. In fact, the film owed such a debt to the great Japanese filmmaker Akira Kurosawa that he would accuse them of theft. The movie they made, Fistful of Dollars, was many things. It was a film for our purposes here that I might describe as what happens when local government fails and different groups contest for control afterwards. It was also a hit, though. It was so much so that Eastwood and Leone would make 2 more films for a few more dollars, and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly after that. And together those films, with scores by another Roman, Ennio Morricone, were said to constitute a new genre, the spaghetti Western. So why do I tell you this story? Because it explains what we're doing here, the challenges we face in the Global Forum, the work we're about to do this week, and the possibilities if we do good work here. Because we at the Forum are taking a risk. We gather here together to work on democracy, a genre of self-government that, like the Western, is thought by some to be in decline. The Global Forum, like that first production of A Fistful of Dollars, does not have a lot of money, actually. This event has been cobbled together with the support of the City of Rome and from many companies and organizations and sponsors and people from all over the world. Most of us are paying our own way. I want to thank all of you and all of our sponsors for making this possible. We also can't be sure if what we will do here will matter. We are a group of journalists, scholars, activists, officials, citizens, very much interested in local democracy, direct democracy, and participation. But the world still sees democracy, incorrectly, I would argue, as primarily a national enterprise. When someone asks you whether you live in a democracy, they're probably asking you whether your country is in democracy, not whether your city is one. Despite all this, all of us, just like Sergio Leone and Clint Eastwood, are here to make something new. And that's right. We're not just going to talk and share our stories as we've done at previous global forums from Tunis to Seoul. This week, we're movie producers, baby. And that means that here in the city of Rome, they've asked us to come up with a Magna Carta. And that's the phrase that I guess was used because Roman politicians are a little like Hollywood studio executives. They love to raise the expectations. And so this Magna Carta puts cities, not nations, at the heart of the question, do you live in a democracy? This is a significant shift in thinking from the national to local, and we don't know whether the world will buy it, but we're going to make the movie anyway. And so just as Leone and Eastwood stole from Kurosawa, this Magna Carta will steal from all of you. We will make the first draft of this Magna Carta from your ideas, your questions, and your shared experiences. We'll draft the document from the discussion and inputs we hear at the forum. And then on Saturday, the forum attendees will edit and produce a first draft to send out into the world. This Magna Carta seeks to explain what it means to be a democracy city. That is, a city committed to greater and more direct democracy and participation. And we hope this document will form the basis for a new international league of democracy cities and for much discussion, debate, and suggestions over the next year and all over the world. Then we intend to take all that input and finalize the Magna Carta in October 2019 when the Global Forum gathers again in Taichung, Taiwan. What is the spirit of this Magna Carta in this Global Forum? In the late 19th century, Josiah Royce, who is my home state of California's first great philosopher, was preoccupied with the question of what it meant to be loyal in the context of your own community. What made his philosophy different is that he didn't see loyalty as a reason to exclude outsiders. To be loyal to our communities, he argued, we need to open them up, to make them more cosmopolitan and more inclusive of people and ideas from other places. This week, we've come from many different cities and communities all around this world, and my hope is that we will practice Josiah Royce's loyalty. We will serve our own communities by reaching out globally to take the ideas of others and then guide our thinking about democracy in our communities. And in the process, maybe we will be making our own spaghetti Western. So let's get started. Or as Mr. Leone might have said, lights, camera, action. Thank you.
Grazie a John Matthew e Bruno Kaufmann.
I would like to thank John Matthews and Bruno Kaufmann, the two co-founders of the Global Forum. We're giving the floor to Flavia Marzano, who's the Rome City Minister for Citizens' Participation. Thank you very much. Our mayor said that we are just starting using those tools. I would like to say that we are just starting, but with great determination, because that's what we've been doing in this field for 2 years, ever since we arrived at the capital. Participation is an important point for our administration, and it's also a mainstay and a link that allows us to look at Rome under different angles. The Roma Semplice Councillor Office it bases its activities on listening. Our mayor mentioned listening to the people. Also, Minister talked about information. These are the topics and the important things. Listening also means listening to the citizens, because inclusion means participation, and participation ensures transparency, and transparency is our duty. Besides being a principle we intend to promote, and we firmly believe that citizens should and may actively participate in the choices that concern them directly, and they are directly concerned by those choices. And our administration is absolutely committed to this, and this is proven by the many consultations we have launched so far. I am extremely happy to be here today. It was a long journey also by our administration, because also with the administration we have launched many consultations by asking our citizens for their advice. The digital agenda, for instance, was online for 1 month, and then there was a consultation on the gender side of this topic. We have refurbished a new portal, and we did that through 2 different online consultations or surveys. I was talking about that with a Swiss journalist this morning, and those surveys allowed us to collect some 5,000 suggestions. They were all extremely serious, extremely punctual, extremely good, and many of those suggestions were implemented. And implementing them makes the citizens who proposed those changes more willing to trust us. Democracy is not going through a crisis. Probably the crisis is that of trust. Citizens do not trust their administrations that much. And we have, again, launched another consultation in order to understand what citizens need. For instance, participatory accounts. And actually today is the closing, September 26th. It's the last day that, the last voting day, in order to understand how to spend those 17 million euros. There were many consultations on mobility, on the social plan, on climate and sustainable energy. That's a commitment. It's true. Our mayor said that we are humbly approaching this implementation, but we have never missed the opportunity to have our citizens participate. I'm sure that President Sturni will talk about it in deeper detail, but also reviewing the statutes of the city that also included all the chapter concerning participation. Well, digitalization is a tool, but it's a tool that should guarantee the effectiveness of direct democracy institutions. I am an IT person, an IT expert that have been borrowed by politics, and for years have been asking politics to do these things. And finally, when our mayor asked me to do those things, that seemed to me a huge opportunity that was offered to me. I would like to thank her every day. So new forms of participation also through the internet, being aware that there is a digital divide. Rome has been working on this since day one. After a month after we took office, we made a decision and created areas where citizens that should access services online. Well, there are areas where they can find someone that, some mentors, let's say, that teach them how to access those services. And those people are working on a voluntary basis, people that have been purposely trained in order to have to allow everybody to access the internet in order to ensure greater democracy, greater participation. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I would like to thank Councillor Marzano, and I would like to give the floor to the first international guest, Jin Sung-yeon, Deputy Mayor of Seoul.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Sung-jun Jin, Vice Mayor for Political Affairs of Seoul Metropolitan Government. Frankly speaking, I'm not good at English, but today I will try my best on my English speech for you and my staff who translate it. Please understand my poor English speech. I am greatly honored to be here today and would like to convey my sincere appreciation to the organizing committee for inviting me to 2018 Global Forum on Modern Direct Democracy. Going through military dictatorship in 1970s and 1980s, the people of the Republic of Korea, and particularly those of Seoul, had a great amount of aspiration for democracy. We accomplished democracy in 1987, thanks to those who shed their blood for it. But after being democratized, we faced different views on democracy. For the past decade, Korea has undergone an unprecedented political turmoil, but the people of Korea have turned the crisis into an opportunity. The people of Korea, including the citizens of Seoul, occupied Bolivar's nearby Seoul City Hall, carrying candles to stand against the then president's violation of Constitution and influence peddling. And the people continued the rallies for days and weeks, chanting the First Amendment to the Korea's Constitution, which is, the Republic of Korea shall be a democratic republic. This was truly the most peaceful and beautiful way to recover our democracy and constitution and give birth to a new government. Our people call it Candle Revolution. Just as a candle lights the world up by burning itself, each and every citizen of Korea carried candles in their hands, shouting and rallying, and resisted to injustice and absurdity, and in the end, led the great victory themselves. Here, I dare say, this candle revolution of our people was the example of the world square democracy, and I believe I could have your consent for this. The candlelight rally was not only the milestone event in our political history, but also a meaningful affair in terms of democratic development in the world history. Sir Karl Raimund Popper, the great philosopher of the 20th century, once defined democracy as a system that makes it possible to get rid of a government without spilling blood. And I believe Korea's candlelight rally was the historical scene that perfectly fits Popper's definition. Many Koreans remember the moment they worked together endlessly with a candle in their hands, the moment they chanted for democracy in one single mind, the moment of triumph that beat the freezing temperature of minus 15 degrees Celsius with hundreds and thousands of candles. I believe that it is our task now to sustain and even heat up the temperatures so that the heat does not only stay in squares or during electoral season, but prevail and exist in everyday democracy. Let alone mentioning the successful cases of revolution, Seoul Metropolitan Government has long been tackling the issues we face through conversations and democratic governance. Our citizens have been involved in policies and budget planning and even joined the era of urban planning of the city, which is considered to be the sector of professionalism. Let me give you a few more examples of our policies that involved citizen participation. Our government successfully produced and reduced energy equivalent to that of 2 nuclear power plants, with participation of 3.6 million citizens. We have also accomplished 2030 Seoul Plan with participation of the citizens, which plays a role of constitution in urban planning. Also, our online open system of civil petition, civic participatory budget system, and voting that utilizes up-to-date IT technology. Democracy Seoul, that serves as an arena of discussion and center of online collective intelligence politics and policies, are a few more examples. Seoul's citizen-led policies are said to be the symbol of direct democracy, being praised worldwide and even contributes to national policies. But we still have things to do. We need to reduce inequality that threatens the lives of our citizens and also cope with climate change and natural disasters, which are the global issue. We still also need to communicate with and embrace both those who are used to old paradigm and the newly introduced citizens. I believe that a community that trusts and takes care of one another is the foundation of better democracy. Now is the time of direct democracy and participatory democracy. I feel it is very timely that we sign on a Charter of Direct Democracy based on the discussions during this forum. I also think it is meaningful for municipal governments like us because direct democracy starts from individual participation, grows into municipal government, and ultimately converges to international level. It is time for all of us, including myself and the world cities, to take actions. I strongly hope that this forum embodies the aspiration of Korea's candlelight citizens, as well as many more people of the world, and to serve as a good foundation of better democracy and better democratic system. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie a Jin Sung-yeon, vice sindaco di Seul.
Thank you to Jin Sung-yeon. Now back to Rome. Angelo Sturni, who is the City Councillor for Constitutional Reform. You have the floor.
Grazie. Angelo Sturni.
Angelo Sturni, I am the City Councillor for Constitutional Reform, and so the Statute of Roma Capitale was amended, and I would like to greet Minister Riccardo Fraccaro, the Mayor, Virginia Raggi, the organizers, distinguished guests and all the organizers. Now, the question today is what is the future of modern democracy? Now, the future of democracy might be in digital platforms because the network is changing completely the relationship between institutions and citizens. We now see a greater request for power decentralization with the birth of smart cities where modern democracy developed on two parallel tracks. We have representative democracy with assemblies and parliaments that is more influenced by the web. And we have lots of local and global movements, and the web is essential. So we have participation platforms that are set up, and in the meantime, direct democracy is strengthened, as is happening in Rome, and we have new digital participatory instruments. So these two worlds, probably in the future, will contaminate each other, and then will blend into a new form of digital democracy, and we could call it hyper-democracy. In Rome, we have chosen digital participation that encourages the participation of the citizen in public life, starting from locally, and this is what we did in Rome. We reformed the statute, and we introduced electronic petitions, participatory counts, and in Rome, this is what we did, and we also introduced this right to participation online so as to encourage the use of new technologies to enhance greater participation of citizens in the lives of in their neighborhoods. And this is what we did in Rome, because in the past you could only submit petitions on paper, but today citizens and associations can submit everything online and log on to the Roma Capitale website. And in the past, we had two types of referendum, and one had one-third quorum. The second needed the majority. With the new statute, we introduced a third type of referendum based on propositions for all the types of referendum. We abolished the quorum, and considering what was established in by the Venice Committee, and we can also adopt the blockchain technology. This is what we have done in Rome. Rome is also using the online system, and we will also have a link with all the municipalities, because we want all citizens during the next few years to decide together how to spend their money. This is what we have done in Rome. With the introduction of online sessions, citizens can be called up to 4 times a year, and they can vote online on issues established by the administration. And we need this physical participation system, and this is just the beginning of a cultural revolution. Naturally, we hope other municipalities and other towns may follow suit, and Rome may also follow the examples of other towns. So great success to all of you, and to the Global Forum. Thank you.
Grazie.
Thank you to Angelo Sturni. And now I would like to give the floor to Thomas Benedicta, author of Direct Democracy, More Power to Citizens. Good afternoon to everybody. Dear Minister, dear Mayor.
Colleague Sturni just has told about new challenges, exciting new challenges of direct participation of citizens in this city. And before, Minister Fraccaro has also explained his plans to reform direct democracy in Italy. So now my task is to tell you very briefly, just give me 9 minutes, why we need so urgently a reform of direct democracy in Italy. So I will just have the chance to have this look back on the last 70 years, but very brief. The Italian Republic came into being through a referendum. On 2nd June 46, almost 90% of Italians went to the ballots, and 54% voted for Italy as a republic instead of a monarchy. Then later, the Constitutional Assembly adopted a quite limited approach to direct democracy. And after fascism, Italy had just regained democracy, and many members of the post-war political elite were afraid about an abuse of referendums. The US, American, and the Swiss experience of direct democracy were too far away for driving the assembly to establish strong popular rights of direct participation. Eventually, only the right to abolish articles of existing laws by a referendum and a kind of constitutional confirmative referendum were adopted. And on the other hand, some very restrictive rules limited the exercise of these rights. In addition, some important issues as the public finance and the international treaties were excluded from any referendum. And also a 50% turnout quorum was introduced. Thus, out of all fundamental forms of direct participation, Italy adopted only one minor form of popular initiative. This is called the abrogative referendum. The right of 500,000 of voters to call on a referendum and to abolish just one or some articles of a law. After the start of Italy as a republic in 1948, the country had to wait until 1974 until the first referendum could be held. Some tools of direct democracy were also introduced and set up in on the regional and municipal level, but being the national legislation so restrictive, also Italy's 20 regions and more than 8,000 municipalities had to stick to these constitutional and national preconditions. And in Italy, still today, there is no real popular initiative as a people's right. And there is no facultative confirmative referendum to block a new law before coming into force. As said before, the very first referendum on the regulation of divorce was held only in 1974. And the ruling party, the Democrazia Cristiana, was clearly defeated. Then the proponents of the small but very active radical party turned to launch referendums almost every year, opening up the so-called seasons of referendums, la stagione dei referendum. 70 single issues have been put on the ballot between 1974 and 2016. And several referendums had a strong impact on Italy's society. Such referendums have raised big political issues and strong debates like the right to abortion, the rules of hunting, nuclear power, energy, power plants, the link of the salaries to the inflation rate, the voting system for the parliament, the finance of political parties, and so on. Although Italy, according to statistical data, is among the countries which most frequently recur to referendums on national level, the concrete effect has been much weaker as it appears. Not less than 27 out of 70 single issues put on polls hasn't achieved the turnout quorum. And in such a case, the whole referendum is simply declared invalid, as you know. In the 20 years between 1997 and 2016, 25 popular votes out of 29 single issues failed. They came to nothing just due to the turnout quorum. So many millions of voters have really been disappointed and frustrated as they won the majority, but the result was not valid. This not only caused a big waste of public money, but also a loss of trust of the people in the very effectiveness of direct democracy. The main conclusion of 44 years of application of the referendums in Italy is that this single form of referendum, the abrogative referendum, is by far not enough to give space to the political creativity of the population, of the citizens, and to allow them for constructive proposals regarding important issues. Today, in Italy, there is always less interest and motivation among the citizens to launch referendums. On regional and on municipal level in Italy, there are extremely few referendums. Even the very basic right of citizens to hold so-called agenda initiative backed by 50,000 voters without having the right to a subsequent popular vote had a very, very limited effect. Less than 10% of such agenda initiatives have even been discussed by the parliament. Summing it up, we can state that the Italian Republic in the first 70 years has been endowed with a very limited set of people's rights on direct democracy, and 40% of all popular votes on single issues failed due to the effect of the turnout quorum. Thus, we just have, and this brings me back to the words of the minister before, we have to learn 3 lessons. First, Italy's set of instruments of direct democracy is not complete. Second, the rules of application are too restrictive and are not citizen-friendly. Third, the turnout quorum is unnecessary and is even harmful. It is, as we call it often, a real referendum killer. It gives way to big campaigns of boycott, and it happened too often in Italy, and this brought the very instrument of participation in discredit. To come to an end, now we are in times of reform. Already in 2012, popular initiative has been launched to reform our direct democracy, and this has been taken up by the current Minister for Direct Democracy, Riccardo Fraccaro, in the last legislature. Today, since the last parliamentary vote, we have finally got a political majority which seems to be willing to overcome this regime of direct democracy and wants to take up seriously the reform of referendum rights. So, to come to an end, Italy's society today is ready for this reform. And its political institutions need this reform. Direct democracy cannot be limited to a very rare event to cancel just one or some articles of a law. But direct democracy, as said before, is the second pillar of a modern and complete democratic system. And Italian citizens are ready to use it in a free and a responsible manner, as it happens in so many other countries. You are representing more than 40 countries in the world. And so I would like to thank to the Minister for his commitment for this purpose, which will not be easy to be brought forward in the Parliament. And so I wish him all the best. Colgo l'occasione per ringraziare il Ministro della sua disponibilità.
I would like to thank the Minister for his commitment and wish him all the very best for this very important reform in Italy. Thank you.
Grazie a Thomas Benedicter. Passo la parola a Matthew.
I would like to give the floor now to Matthew Kneale, novelist, author of Rome, A History of 7 Seconds.
Being the capital of Italy and Catholicism, and a famously beautiful city with a great climate and fantastic food, Rome is also something else. It's a place where politics has gone on and has been recorded for 3,000 years. Rome is a political case study like nowhere else on earth. Romans have lived under every kind of political system, from oligarchy to theocracy, and from dictatorship and monarchy to democracy. Often, Romans have lived under more than one at the same time. This forum is about democracy and cities. Is there anything we can learn from Romans' various experiences with democracy? Should they fill today's democrats with hope or fear? Before this present age, democracy enduringly showed its face in Rome 3 times, under the classical Roman Republic, under the medieval Senate, and under the constitutional Kingdom of Italy. None of these, sadly, was in any way perfect. To our eyes, the medieval Senate, which met on this very hill, was barely recognizable as a democracy. Dominated by Rome's wealthiest families, it was a strange and unstable institution. Sometimes there were 56 senators, sometimes just 1. And yet, even here, the spirit of democracy can be clearly seen. There were elections of some kind, though it's not clear who voted or how, and there was passion to give Roman citizens a voice, to counter the autocracy of the popes, and to defend Rome's heritage. Evidence suggests that the Senate may first have come into being after Romans grew angry when Pope Innocent II looted the baths of Caracalla for stone. Though the Senate survived in some form for centuries, it was soon ground down by the power of the papacy. Put simply, the popes had money from church property, taxes, and from pilgrims. If the demise of the Senate has a lesson for us today, it is that democracy needs proper funding. It needs taxes. This may seem obvious, yet in these days of offshore banking and when trillionaire tech companies feel under no moral compunction to pay tax to anyone, it is no bad thing to have a reminder. The Roman Republic of classical times was much more recognizable as a democracy, though it too was a very flawed one. Like the medieval Senate, it was dominated by rich aristocratic families who sometimes bribed and threatened voters. And yet, as in any functioning democracy, there was free speech, while the voters of the poorer plebeians from the city and the nearby countryside could make a real difference. The plebeians also stood up for themselves. Well organized, they fought hard for their rights, political and economic, and sometimes took a very radical form of strike action, marching out of the city en masse and decamping to a hill outside. What killed the Roman Republic? A key factor was inequality. During this era, Rome became a slave economy. Rich Romans, determined to outdo one another in wealth, kicked poor farmers off their land so they could create huge, highly profitable slave estates. Poor Romans in the city could not compete with unpaid slaves and became dependent on state handouts. Over the centuries, vast wealth became concentrated in the hands of an ever smaller number of people. Sounds familiar? So here's another warning from Rome's past. Inequality is bad for democracy. If ordinary people feel themselves ever worse off, while a tiny minority is visibly, shockingly wealthy, there is a real danger that people will cease to believe that democracy can serve them. They will cease to feel involved and will look to simple answers and new saviors. Dictatorship beckons, and there is always a would-be dictator in the wings, waiting their chance. Thirdly, and finally, we come to Rome and Italy's years of constitutional monarchy under the Savoy kings. Like the medieval Senate and the classical Roman Republic, this was far from perfect. As ever, it was dominated by wealthy families. Too many Italians had no vote. There was corruption and clannishness, and yet, unlike the other 2 regimes we have looked at, this was clearly recognizable as a modern democracy. The electorate felt its powers and flung out governments it ceased to support. There were radical changes of leadership between conservatives and socialists. People from relatively modern backgrounds made their way to the top. What destroyed this democracy? 2 things. war and fear. In May 1915, after months of furious debates and demonstrations, Italy entered the First World War. Though Italians fought courageously, had a good number of successes, and were on the winning side, the cost was enormous. More than 500,000 Italians died, and many more were left disabled. Italy became filled with angry, war-brutalized soldiers who wondered what their sacrifice had been for. For them, a vote in elections was no longer enough. They wanted to feel power in their hands. And many Italians, especially the wealthy, the conservative, and the religious devout, were happy to give them power because of their fear of something scarily alien, Russian Bolshevism. Today, people worry that our democracies are threatened by fake news and the power of social media. But I would say that this is misleading. Fake news has been around as long as politics itself, and social media is just a new way of transmitting it. Fake news is only believed because the existing structure has already lost credibility. War, fear, failure to tax, and inequality will all cause this to happen. At this moment, the most destructive of the four, without question, are inequality and fear. Fear of financial uncertainty, fear of losing one's livelihood to an app, and fear of the scarily alien phenomena of our own time, Islamic fundamentalism and boatloads of immigrants. But to look at Rome's long history does more than just help us to see democracy's weak spots. It also reminds us why democracy is worth having and worth fighting for. Ancient Rome's first true emperor, Augustus, who dismantled the Roman Republic and is often remembered rather fondly today as a leader who brought peace to Rome after decades of civil war and chaos. Yet it was Augustus who also made Rome into a police state and stifled free speech, prompting a slow decline in Roman culture. And by depriving people of the power to choose their leaders, Augustus opened the way to monsters. He himself may have been a relatively benign autocrat, but that was not so of his successors, who included a murderous, paranoid schizophrenic, Caligula, and a murderous and talentless wannabe singer, Nero. As Romans became accustomed to subjection, murderous emperors became the norm. Peace didn't last long either. The empire evolved into a military dictatorship in which would-be emperors seized control by means of brutal civil wars, which became commonplace and were a major factor in the empire's eventual collapse. Benito Mussolini, who also dismantled a functioning democracy, was a great admirer of Augustus. Mussolini felt nothing but scorn for his elected predecessors, whom he considered ineffectual, lazy, and self-serving. Fascism, by contrast, he saw as dynamic, selfless, and efficient. Yet the truth was rather different. Italy's fascist leaders, bereft of scrutiny or criticism, made bad decisions. The two yardsticks by which Mussolini felt a regime should be judged were the economy and military power. Under elected governments, before the First World War, Italy's economy had been one of the fastest growing in Europe, ahead even of Germany's. Under fascism, it was one of the very slowest. When it went to war in 1915, Italy, though it was still a poor country, was well prepared and held its own against bigger, richer states. When fascist Italy went to war in 1940, its military was deplorably under strength and badly equipped, and its first major campaign, its armies were beaten back by a far smaller and weaker state, Greece. Disaster followed disaster. Like any dictatorship where government is answerable to nobody, fascism became corrupt. Though Mussolini himself was not avaricious, he made little or no effort to restrain the many in his movement who were. Leading fascists became quickly and inexplicably wealthy. Previously poor local fascist bosses went on lavish holidays, sent their wives on shopping trips in official cars, and ate in the best restaurants, often without paying the bill. Ordinary Italians could only look on, knowing there was nothing they could do. And this, more than anything else, is the reason why democracy, for all its many flaws, is worth fighting for. Under a democratic government, people can complain of injustice and can appeal to the legal system, however slow and clunking, for restitution. A democratic system does not need to be ingeniously representative, or even completely fair. It needs to give ordinary people the power to look over their rulers' shoulders and make them nervous of failure. Most of all, when a government regime does fail, democracy needs to give people the power to chuck it out without having to risk their lives in an insurrection. Is democracy in peril now, as many people worry? Democracy faces real danger when voters cease to believe that any elected people will look out for them or will answer their fears. That's the moment when, in desperation, they lunge for easy answers and new saviors, the moment when dictators waiting in the wings are dreaming of. To keep that moment at bay, democratic leaders need to do only one thing. They need to remember who they're really working for. They need to serve not themselves, but ordinary people. They need to listen to voters, not those who have money to pour into party funds. I don't think we're close to that moment yet. I don't see this as a time to despair, but it is a time to be wary.
Grazie a Matthew Knill.
Thank you to Matthew Knill. Well, we have finished our first session, our opening of the Global Forum 2018. It was just to know what is going to happen during the next few days with lots of guests, lots of very interesting sessions and workshops that will really talk about everything related to direct democracy. Thank you to everybody, thank you to the authorities, and thank you to all the citizens who have joined us from all over the world. This is really wonderful. And I want to remind you that there's a surprise for all the people who are here with us, because from 6:30 p.m. on, there will be buses that will be waiting for you, and we have a welcome cocktail at 7:30. We can all drink a glass of red wine, and we can all talk about direct democracy. So let's all go there together, and we'll meet again tomorrow morning at 9 to start working on our panels and during the next few days. Thank you.